Hello and welcome to Dynamics Update. This time it's an interview episode, and as usual, I have Gustav Sundblad with me, my colleague. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
And today we actually have a very, very special guest who I met when I was at the MVP Summit in Redmond. Ryan, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan. I'm the Vice President for Power Apps here at Microsoft. So I look after the product and engineering team for our flagship low-code platform. What a lot of people don't realize is that means my team also looks after a lot of the user experience layer used under both Dynamics CE and F&O applications. For us, Dynamics apps are architecturally, at least, they are Power Apps, just built by Microsoft and extended and customized by the community. And so we really think about all different aspects of the platform in that broader umbrella of Power Apps.
All right.
Very cool.
That's great.
And I think you guys met at the MVP. There was a specific area. This is a Dynamics podcast, Dynamics F&O podcast. Sorry, but both me and Johan are very coming from AX originally, of course, Axapta back in the day, and I think I was actually at the Convergence in Barcelona a couple of years back when Power Apps was out. I think it was like a hallelujah moment there. Everyone was like, "What? The end possibilities are endless. We can do this, and we can do this," and it was really cool. And I've been using Power Apps myself, but I think one of the topics would like to discuss later on today is how to make use of Power Apps in that ERP context. But I think you guys had or specifically you, Ryan, had a specific session there that I think Johan wanted to dig deep into as well.
Yes, so I really got stuck on the title. The title is Low Code, Big AI, and everything we got wrong about the future of software. So that's a bit humble, maybe.
Yeah.
But I also liked the discussion that you had about the real thought about the citizen developers, because I think they have sort of gotten a bad rep in that they are not the people who can build the code. But you had another view on this.
Yeah, so Gustav, I love that you bring up that Barcelona event. That was like my 6th week on the job at Microsoft.
Okay.
I joined right before we really started to come to market with Power Apps, and I was there at that event and helped pull off that demo. I think there was a very Zapta era style demo of heavy construction equipment in a Power App up on stage, and look, at that time it was very early for Power Platform.
Yeah.
I mean, that was long before we really merged the Power Apps and Automate software project with, the rest of the Dynamics platform. It was long before we really had, frankly, viable tools for production use. But the vision was there, and I think, to maybe come around to Johan's point, the vision was, as all visions of really early stage things, inherently flawed in some ways. And I think. At the time we were both, I would say, overly optimistic about the demand for, average people with real jobs to wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, I want to build software, but also in some cases, overly stratified in the difference between that type of a person and a professional. And I think one of the things we've realized is that the relationship is really important on both sides. There are people who are waking up on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday mornings and saying, I want my job to be better. And they are doing things to make it better that are within their power. And I would say they are rarely going out and recreating an ERP from scratch. But they, at least not successfully, but they are doing things around the boundaries of that software that are really important to their day job. And sometimes those things can be very effective. Sometimes those things can be very dangerous. And having a relationship between, people that are understanding and responsible for code and people that are understanding and responsible for actually getting their jobs done, that is one of the most important innovations of Power Platform. Just bringing those two ends of the spectrum to the same table, to the same toolkit, has actually, I think, changed more than any one, feature or tool or capability in and of itself.
It's very cool. And the Power Platform, the Power Apps, is it like the power users? Is that where the power comes from, or is it more of like a sales pitch, the power thing? Because it really is like an empowerment tool, exactly that which you describe. I've been seeing throughout many, not only the ERP implementations. When you do the process analysis, you see these things. Yeah, this is what we do every Monday. We take this Excel file, we do this, we do that, we do this. It takes 4 hours. It's like, okay, but does it need to take 4 hours? So it's really like an efficiency enhancement, like empowering people to make it a better business day, basically, to make their life a little bit better than what it is today. And that's really where I see most of the usage today, which is really cool. Like those little snippets of like processes. It's not, as you say, it's not rebuilding ERP. God knows, however, that Excel, I think it was the most used ERP system throughout the world, right?
Well, and actually, if you look at companies that are really going big with Power Platform and low code, one of the main things they're doing is to reduce risk of those things that end up in Excel.
Exactly.
Because when your system is inflexible and you are unable to meet the demands of real people with real jobs fast enough, life finds a way. They will, they will, and anything can be exported as a CSV, right? And opened in Excel. And so, I think what a lot of organizations over the last 5 or 10 years were able to sort of turn a blind eye to are now realizing not only is that a huge potential for better productivity. If I can go take a 4-hour a week or 4-hour a day process and compress it to seconds, I'm driving real business value, but also a huge risk reduction factor. If I can keep that out of Excel under the desk and email and keep it tied to the core system that I've secured at the API layer, that I've implemented role-based access control over, I'm improving the trust profile of the organization at the same time. I can't accomplish all those tasks by forcing people to wait in line in the backlog, and just funding more traditional software development. I have to sort of change the pace and the economics of how it.
That was a really good saying. I think life finds a way. That's a really perfect evolutionary, because that's exactly what happens, right? If you're waiting on something to go live, and in the end, someone just fixes it with Excel or, God forbid, a VB script somewhere. And in the end, if you finalize that kind of catchphrase, it would be like life finds a way, and then you need to maintain it.
Exactly.
That's where it ends up. That IT and maintenance budgets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But there was a person in a large energy company who went by the name Dr. No internally. Initially, global IT admin, very opposed to citizen development. That person actually now works at Microsoft on Power Platform and is a huge advocate for Power Platform and good governance. But shared at a Gartner conference in between. Hey, I came around to this when I realized that a well-regulated open market is generally better than a black market.
Exactly.
If you pretend it's not happening, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of externalities than, if you really embrace and serve it effectively.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the center of excellence came in, right? That was a really good, like a big driver towards actually being able to say, we have this, because the Power Apps were really cool, because you could I can do this, watch, I can publish an app on my phone, really cool. But now you can actually combine it as well with at least a set of governance rules that you can make people feel safe and also ensure that it doesn't break, because they are as critical as that Excel file that we just mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think that's been a huge area of innovation for us over the last year or two, is really mainstreaming governance at scale. And so, not only do we have a whole kit of templates and parts in the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, we now have first-class features in the product called managed environments that allow you to, by flipping a switch, get granular and proactive alerting, granular controls over who can share what, implement best practice data policies, set up even deployment pipelines between environments. We have customers, there's a public case study, a customer Lumen, that is managing 3,000 developer environments and funneling them into 120 production environments in Power Platform. And that's even a mid-size company, and there are customers that are doing this at just massive scale.
It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think the strength in this is that you can have as much or as little governance as you want.
Yeah.
Because as I said, you could have the most necessary things in place,
right,
so that you don't lose your data. It doesn't head off somewhere, and it doesn't force people to export it into an Excel file and place it on a thumb drive or something like that. Because that also gives you the creativity. But you can also have, once the app is so business critical, that you absolutely need it, that you can't live without it, then you can adopt it into like IT or full governance model.
Yeah, absolutely. And usually before it becomes that critical, because at some point, you want to have somebody looking at it more closely if it's really driving a lot of value in the business. But I think that's starting to change the nature of how customers invest here. I think the first wave of governance investment was really reactive and defensive. Let's hold the castle and protect people from getting access to sensitive information. Yeah. Those are important, but insufficient. And I think we're seeing a new wave of thinking in a lot of customer organizations be really, how do I support it? How do I encourage it even in the company as a culture and as a community, and have technical resources ready to come either take over or at least assist the top 10% of use cases that really rise up and need that extra help. Because there a lot of companies are realizing, hey, I've got 400, 500, 1,000, 4,000 people building something in Power Platform every month. Most of them I did not have to hire to be a software engineer, but they are actively trying to make the company better with software. The cost of enabling them to succeed versus the ROI, I mean, that math pencils as opposed to just pretending they don't exist or trying to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's two different conversations, right? Two different answers, really. Whenever I encounter as like ERP implementation, it's two different forums. If I hardline it, the one is IT, which is like, how do we lock it down? How do we ensure? Right. Not always, of course, but most generally, it's more like, how do I enable this policy? How do I? What's the difference between production and sandbox? These types of pretty common technical questions. Whereas the other one from business controllers and like CFOs is like, okay, how do we make this work in the most efficient way possible, and how do I enable my users to use this so you need to be able to answer both, because the sell pitch is super easy, right? Because you can spin up a demo app very fast. It's really like the power of the platform, right? Yeah. Whereas the other one requires at least some understanding of the actual platform and then the technical, both limitations as well, to be clear. I mean, there are limitations. It's not always like a perfect. I usually describe it as a very good an efficiency enhancement tool, which works very good in combination, specifically for us coming from, I'm rarely in a conversation only about Power Platform. It's always about F&O together with Power Platform. So I'm at an advantage because I can find, you can put it here and you can put it here. I don't have to start from scratch. That's one of my advantages as well. But what's your take there? I mean, on is that a good summary to like phrase it as an enhancement tool rather than maybe, I mean, if you have a super business critical that needs to run on milliseconds, like responsiveness, then maybe F&O isn't your answer either. But then you need, but at least it's not maybe maybe Power App is not your weapon of first choice. At least maybe you need to go somewhere else, but it can do something else. Is that like say?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's inaccurate. Look, I am very proud of my hammer. That does not make everything a nail, and
no, exactly.
There are definitely there's certain places where Power Platform really makes a lot of sense. One of those is kind of create those very specific experiences or views or micro productivity tasks for very specific types of users, for whom hunting and pecking around the front door of an ERP system is actually inefficient. Maybe it's something they don't need to do every day. They're not the financial comptroller. There's somebody sitting in a department over here. But I'd much rather have them work with actual up-to-the-minute data than mess around in a spreadsheet. That's definitely one important category. Yeah. I would say, another important category is similar, but it's when those processes cross data boundaries with other systems. And no ERP exists in a vacuum. What about when I am correlating month-end close with data in my sales pipeline and other forecasting information somewhere else? Not every customer is on one beautifully unified stack, right? Or we have conglomerates that use 3 or 4 different CRM systems and 2 different ERPs. Being able to create that layer of a bridge is really valuable for a lot of organizations. And then in terms of sophistication, I would say that one is tricky. There is no real bright line by which, past a certain point, Power Platform is not okay for sophistication. I think there are customers with Power Apps deployed as mission critical frontline tools to a workforce of 30,000 people distributed around the world. There are apps and instances of Dataverse that have more than 1 million monthly active users, including really high volume concurrent writes, compressed into certain timeframes. This is the platform we build several multi-billion-dollar businesses on, and Microsoft has thousands of professional engineers ourselves working on every single day. And so it can do more advanced things. That doesn't mean it has to do all of them. There's definitely
no, exactly.
This is that it makes sense. And I would say in the hands of professionals, we often see Power Platform really be hybridized with other components. Let me spin up a serverless function in Azure, or connect to an API that I'm managing, or write a piece of UX code in PCF and drop it in. In those cases, it really, to your point, it's not magic wand. It really comes down to, where do I as a customer want to own the technical debt going forward? Versus where do I want to push it to Microsoft, and what is the cost benefit analysis on each of those components of the solution? And there are certainly things where it will make sense for a customer or their partner to own that technical debt and specificity going forward. There are other places where it does not. Core integration with systems, security with AAD, scaling a transactional backend, piping it into data analytics. Those are repeatable solved problems that we shouldn't be reinventing every single time.
Exactly, right. It's not Minecraft. It's something which you can do. That's really cool. And as I said, I personally come into contact with it, apart from playing with it for myself. I come into contact with it in a professional ERP context. So you have this big box of tools already. It's more like finding, okay, where can I do this? And then there I really always come back to the looking at how people work, regardless of ERP, really. Like, this is something I spend 4 hours a week doing. Can it be enhanced? Can I do this better? Not only from cost savings, data collection is another one, which is really super, super clear. Like, I need to do this. I need to enter this data. If I enter it incorrectly, then I mess it up over here. You can do it in Excel, but the risk is high, and it's like, as you say, maintainability. Super easy, sellable areas where you can really use Power Apps specifically for those. Still haven't gotten the hang of Power Virtual Agents in the ERP context, but I'm getting there. We're getting there. I got another interview previously. They were like, but then you can ask questions like, can you show me a list of all these vouchers? You can actually talk with the ERP. That's where you can really leverage AI and Power Virtual Agents. But I need to try it out.
No, and I think people are going to realize pretty quickly, especially with all the advancements in large language, that Power Virtual Agents just becomes the best way to build your own version of ChatGPT that's very focused on specific data sources and specific use cases. And I think that's really rapidly where that tech is heading. I mean, already today, I can point a Power Virtual Agent at a knowledge base, and it will answer or fall back to answer in the same type of style as a GPT LLM over everything in that knowledge base, even if I haven't already coded a deterministic, conversation flow. So, I do think we're going to start continuing to reimagine a whole lot of software, and even things that we thought looked like forms over data business apps a year ago will start to take new modalities pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that one of the important parts, as you said, with the large language modules today, is that we don't have to learn all of the languages, because it already understands them.
Right.
It could be Swedish, it could be English, it could be C#, it could be PowerShell, it could be search SEO in Google, for instance. So just the fact that we can say something to it, and it can formulate it into something that the system actually understands and work with.
I think your AI is trying to
exactly. It's trying to tell you something
right now.
It's way ahead of you, Johan.
Apparently. Apparently.
Yeah, but you're spot on, and I think, look, this. If we zoom back to the original conversation of kind of the relationship between business people and technical implementers, as the tools get better, what they do is they compress the time and the cost between a human with a need and instructions to computers that are viable to deploy at scale. And the more we can compress that cost, the more we can actually experiment and iterate and work much more flexibly with the humans who actually have the need. And that has been really the mission of low code in general, is just change the economics of implementation there are no magic wands, but there are compression of time, compression of effort, compression of cost. And the more we can do that, the more we can open up what we can afford to create and iterate on. Because there's just a lot of software that's not getting built today for economic reasons, not necessarily technology reasons.
No, but that's one of the more common use cases I do as well. Apart from demoing, like proof of concepting. How would you do this? Like, let's say, commerce consignment application. Just build something that works good enough, and then you can try it out very, very quickly and get feedback very quickly. That's what you say, like enabling. You don't need to know C# to do that, which you used to have to do. So that's another one of the use cases we more commonly see in ERP. How can I try out this new process without redesigning or building new views in F&O?
Sure.
Well, let's try it here in Power Apps and see how it works and get instant feedback. That's a very good gratification. You're up and running in a day maximum.
Exactly. And the cool thing is you can actually be up and running. It's not just a Figma mock-up of a user experience. And you're not treating your users as research subjects. You're really actively collaborating with them on real running code. And you may find after a day that that's not the right answer. And so, I need to pivot. But just the fact that I got there so quickly with a real tangible piece of software. I mean, it's not long ago that would have been months of Gantt charts and requirements documents and user acceptance testing and design sprints, and really being able to take a lot of that stuff out of software that's not software is driving a lot of the innovation and pace on the software part.
Yeah, and I mean you have the whole connector model, which is also a really important one. That trying to talk to APIs and understand authentication, all of that, you don't have to look into that. That just works.
Yeah, and that's, again, the business controller is going to say yes, and the IT management guy is going to say, oh, okay, but how do I know? How do I log? How do I do that? So you need to be able to kind of answer. But that's one of the benefits as well. I mean, if you would have done this in F&O, you would have to adhere to all the limitations and the benefits of F&O. Here, I'm guessing that Power Platform here is built, is not like isolated to application object servers. You have these islands of data, and the architecture is different. It's more cloud-oriented, right? So it's more future-proof, if I'm going to use a bad term here.
That's a bold term to use in 2020.
Yeah, it's a different, exactly. Don't shoot me, but it's easier architecture to work with, both from scaling perspective, because it's always like, does it scale? I would imagine it's easier to scale on Power Platform than it is on F&O. Maybe not nowadays, but it used to be at least.
We put a lot of work into the F&O side of scale for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it, Microsoft Dataverse, which is really the platform the engineering group that runs a lot of these cloud-based backends, is by far the largest driver of usage of underlying services like Azure SQL and things like that. We're just creating all the management and scale and abstraction layers on top of them so that customers don't have to worry about that low level of virtual machines. Do I have provisioned, and how big is the underlying database, and do I have it geo-replicated the right way? I mean, all those things are things that in 2023 and 2025, we should not have to be spending our effort and time on as implementers of software.
Exactly. That's a very good benefit. I think the conversation is like Power Platform in itself, Power Apps specifically, and from a dynamics point of view, trying to understand how do we make best use of it. And I think we covered most of those scenarios as well. And it's like understand. I think one of the key takeaways from me and from if anyone's listening is to the same goes with Dataverse as well, because it's kind of like if you only worked with F&O before, it's like Dataverse, do I need it? It's dual right. Okay, maybe I need it, maybe I don't. Just understand it so you can answer these two questions, because they will come both from a developer perspective. You need to explain it to the architecture guys, the infra guys and girls, as well as the sales part, understanding what this implies. Why do I need to spend 40 hours building this when I can do it in 2 hours in a Power App? Exactly. If you know these things, you don't necessarily have to build them, but just understand how it works. Then I hope at least your life as a developer, architect, controller, or whatever will be a little bit better and make benefit for the company as well, of course.
Yeah, focus on the more interesting problems, I think.
Exactly, right. And solve them in efficient ways. Yeah,
exactly. And shift the burden of maintaining it to Microsoft, where you actually get real network effects from being able to do it in aggregate as opposed to do it in a silo over and over and over again.
Exactly.
But, from a Dataverse perspective, and if you look at just the raw economics of for customers invested in Power Platform, when I cover a user with a full per user license of Power Apps, they have unlimited access to use as many applications as they want, built on, the whole system that we build several multi-billion-dollar businesses on top of today. Which independently retail for a lot more than that Power Apps license. And so you get to really interesting unit economics at scale, because it means for customers, the marginal software cost of every new app they deploy goes to zero very, very quickly. And they can use that not only to mitigate risk and drive innovation, but frankly also to consolidate a lot of other sort of isolated software workloads, which, by the way, were not in aggregate easily addressable to data, to BI, and ultimately to AI. And so as I start to pull all those things together onto a common platform layer, I'm actually not just reducing my risk now, I'm actually preparing myself to ask more interesting questions and be ready for a much more AI capable future.
And enabling a lot of scenarios that weren't there before, making use. I mean, just using Dataverse in itself, together with FNO as our weapon of choice here, just enables you to do a lot more things. As long as you can explain to the data policy guys that, okay, I'm ensuring that only stays here, or it can go here as well, or don't. It depends depends on your line of work, I would imagine.
Fair enough.
I think you brought up an interesting thing there, because regarding the licensing, I mean, the thing I hear from customers a lot is that licensing for Power Platform is fairly expensive, since we need it for all of the users and so on. But I think an important part to understand that is that if you do 1 or 2 Power Apps for a couple of users, then it's fairly expensive for what you get out of it. But it requires sort of a commitment. If you commit to Power Platform and you start using it, then the licensing is still it's per user. So it doesn't really matter how many. I mean, the only thing extra that you're actually paying for is basically consumption, which you do anywhere else anyway. So.
Yeah, no, and I think there are a lot of customers figuring out that actually Power Platform is very affordable and relative to how you use it, and what you get for it. And that's not academic. Forrester went and talked to 33 Power Apps customers that all spend more than $1 million a year on Power Apps licenses, and found that in their first year, not only do they recoup that cost, they garner an additional $1 million of benefit in the first 12 months. And that even as they spend significantly more over the course of 3 years, their benefit actually grows at a triple-digit rate. And so they end up exiting, a 3-year time period with a significant multiplier on top of that initial $1 million ROI. And so that, that's just and that's aggregate across 33. I mean, HSBC told them they made their money back in the first 6 days. With a particular solution that they were able to deploy. So, but it does change the thinking from sort of cost per workload to sort of more of a macroeconomic, as I invest in the capability and use it across a large body of use cases, what is the incremental value returned to the business, the risk reduced, and the efficiency of deploying it compared to what I otherwise would have done.
It is sort of like thinking about the cost of infrastructure. It needs to be there, but once it's there, we've already paid for it.
Exactly.
But that's where the problem comes in, the tricky part, like the soft measurement, because again, with the scenario of making life better for like business controllers, you save 4 hours a week. That's great. But as long as you can say that they save 4 hours a week, that's a good ROI, right? Because that you can actually measure. So I think that's where you need to really be able to, if you're starting from scratch, I think maybe then you can build something that can actually leverage like easily measurable value. If you're doing it as an enhancement towards FNO or CE, then that's the tricky part, making sure that, okay, what are we actually using it for and how does it give us value? So if you can get that measured, then I think it should be a no-brainer to like leverage it, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of good templates for that in fact, we put that whole Forrester economic study on our website now. But there's a lot of good thinking templates about how to calculate both the hard return and the soft benefit of low code. But even those soft benefits are real. I mean, if you sure, in any one scenario, you can make arguments one way or the other. But the bigger question to have with a customer is, look, 5 years from now, what is the cost of not changing the way that your humans interact with their core financial system and information? What is the cost of still having everything under the desk in a spreadsheet? And even the cost of risk of that information getting out of the company. What is the cost of not putting it into better BI? What is the cost of not making it ready for AI? And how are you going to be relevant in that time horizon? That becomes a very different type of conversation than sort of looking at one solution or one isolated use case at a time.
Yeah, so that's a really important part, that not making a decision also comes with a cost.
Oh, absolutely.
And that it's very easy to think that if I don't do anything, that it won't cost anything.
Yeah,
but it will.
Absolutely.
And
yes,
yeah,
that's a good argument.
I think that's a fairly good place to end the discussion. Ryan, do you have anything else that you would like to say before we hang up for today?
No, I really appreciate the high quality discussion and questions, and it's really encouraging to see, all aspects of the BizApps community, and especially the F&O community, sort of having these conversations right now. We've come a long way from an early demo on a stage in Barcelona all those years ago. I think for me, the next chapter is even more exciting of where we go next. So
yes,
that's a long way of saying thank you, and thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, and Ryan, thank you a lot for being able to join us. It was really fun talking to you.
Cheers. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.